And you're a go, Alon.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks to the Mentorship Boardroom for giving me the opportunity to present today, to talk to everyone today. I'm talking about a subject that is very close to my heart. My name is Allon Raiz. I've been involved in the entrepreneurship space for around 30 years, and for the last 21 years of those 30 years, I've been running a business called Raizcorp, which supports entrepreneurs. We're currently supporting over 500 businesses across South Africa, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique, Angola, and we've had about 13,500 businesses that have come through Raizcorp over the last 21 years. Now, I was asked at my 20 years to write a series called The Lessons I've Learned, 20 Lessons in 20 Years. And I wrote this for Daily Maverick. And so what I'm going to be doing now is going to be sharing, not in written form, but in verbal form, some of those lessons that I have learned over the last 20 years. And every month I will be sharing one of those lessons with you. So hopefully what I've learned in 20 years, we can get through in 20 months together. I'm going to try and keep this quite interactive. So I'll just frame the subject and then open it up to you to ask questions, and I'll just respond to those questions as they come up. So let's start talking about why I asked the question, am I an entrepreneur? Why is it the first lesson? And the reason for that is because when you look at the entrepreneurial statistics across the globe, and not just South Africa, we know that 96% of businesses that start out fail within a 10-year period. So out of every 100 businesses that started, the 100 people who are watching this today, that all started a business today, only 4 of you would be around in the next 10 years. So you notice I said businesses fail, but entrepreneurs, do they fail? That's the question, do they fail? Well, in South Africa, there is another statistic I think that's very important to look at, and that's what we call the re-entry rate, the ability of those entrepreneurs who fail to get up again and re-enter as entrepreneur into the market. Now, if you look at the re-entry rate in the US, it's around 3.6 times. In other words, an entrepreneur will fail 3.6 times before they give up. In South Africa, that re-entry rate is 1.1. In other words, when we fail, we never come back again. So it's a very important question to ask yourself before you start this endeavor, whether I am really an entrepreneur and whether I have the characteristics and capabilities in order to actually be one of those entrepreneurs that stand up again and come back in perhaps a different business or an iteration of the same business. When you look more closely to that statistic of 96%, the important thing to note is 90% of the 96% just give up. They wake up one morning and they say, I can't do it anymore. Why that's important is because if you understand that statistic, you understand that no one made them turn them insolvent. They actually just woke up one morning and said, I can't handle this anymore, and just gave up. And perhaps you might have been one of those entrepreneurs. Perhaps you are one of those entrepreneurs that's thinking about giving up, and maybe you're thinking about whether or not to become an entrepreneur. So I want to share some interesting insights and to frame this for you before you even start to think about whether or not you are an entrepreneur. So let's just look at this word entrepreneur. If you look at what they call the psychological typology of an entrepreneur, in other words, what psychological makeup or characteristics do entrepreneurs have, you read all these books on entrepreneurship, and you on all the academia on it, and you get to the last paragraph on the last chapter, and then it says to you, there is no such thing as an entrepreneur. In other words, if you have this characteristic, that characteristic, and this characteristic, there is no equal sign to entrepreneur. There is no set of characteristics that equals an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are extroverts and they are introverts. They are tall, they are short, they come from wealthy backgrounds, from poor backgrounds. They're good at maths, they're bad at maths. They're good at negotiating and they're bad at negotiating. There's no single set of characteristics that equals an entrepreneur. And why I think that's very important is because in working with thousands of entrepreneurs that I've worked with over the years, there's somehow a notion in many entrepreneurs' minds that I'm not like so-and-so, therefore I'm not an entrepreneur. And I just want to release you from that concept that there is some sort of model that says this type of person is an entrepreneur. However, having said that, there are many characteristics that increase the probability of becoming a successful entrepreneur. And I'll name some of those for you right now. One is obviously perseverance, the ability to push through. The other being flexibility, the ability to adapt as the entrepreneurial journey throws obstacles in your way. One that I love mentioning, and if you want to talk about this a little later, we can, is father issues. If you've got father issues, then you're far more likely to become a successful entrepreneur. Having a high internal locus of control, having the ability to listen, and so on and so forth. There are hundreds and hundreds of characteristics that entrepreneurs have. And at Raizcorp, when we look for entrepreneurs, we look for 27 of these in particular, at a particular level, in order for us to believe that you have the highest probability of becoming an entrepreneur. And yet we know in saying that it doesn't mean an equal sign, that if you have those, then you will become a successful entrepreneur. There are a couple of myths in this entrepreneurship space that I think are important to talk about. If you go to any session on entrepreneurship, there's some dude with a very thick American accent going, if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you got to have passion, man. Got to have passion. And I say BS to that. Because when you look at actually the statistics around passion, you'll see that, or understand that when successful entrepreneurs have been interviewed, many will cite the fact that they were passionate, but many will cite the fact that they weren't passionate about it. This is a true story that I tell often. That we had a entrepreneur who joined Raizcorp who was in the funeral home business, and so in asking what are you passionate about, he turns around and says, dead people, BS. So what happens is when we've learned this thing that we have to be passionate about what we do, we retrofit what we do with what we say we're passionate about. When you look at successful entrepreneurs, what they've done is the reverse of that. They've worked out what they're passionate about, and then they insert that into what they do. So as an example, I run Africa's largest private incubator business. When I started, I'd never even heard of incubation, never heard of the terminology. So if somebody asked me on day one or even year one of Raizcorp, what are you passionate about? I wouldn't have said on incubation because I had never heard the term. It was only 2 years into my journey that I heard the term. What is important is commitment. Is more important than passion is commitment. Is that what you see with successful entrepreneurs is the ones that commit to the journey, that commit to getting through the downs and are able to keep themselves grounded in the highs. Those are the ones that succeed. Those are the ones that become part of the 4% that succeed. I just want to end off before we engage a little further to talk about this concept of, are entrepreneurs born or are they made? So whenever I speak around the world, I will get somebody putting up their hand in the audience who will ask the question, are entrepreneurs born or made? And over the years, I've almost worked out who it's going to be in the audience. But a couple of years ago, a piece of research came out that showed that the most successful first-time entrepreneurs, never been entrepreneurs before, were 60 years and older. 60 years and older. Never been an entrepreneur, become an entrepreneur at 60, and then become the least likely to fail. And so if you think about that statistic, you realize that that breaks the question, are they born or made? Because if they've been working at some corporate for the last 30, 40 years, they certainly weren't born an entrepreneur. And being in the corporate for 30, 40 years, they weren't made an entrepreneur. So they weren't born and they weren't made. Something else had to have happened. And what that thing is that they precipitate. So for anyone who's been on this entrepreneurial journey, what you will realize is that there's a certain point in your life that you precipitate into becoming an entrepreneur. And there are 5 conditions that need to be present for you to precipitate into becoming an entrepreneur. I'd love to hear how many of you who are listening or watching here who have started your entrepreneurial journey will attest to these 5 conditions. The first is that every single entrepreneur that has started, it has either seen an opportunity or there was a crisis in their life, or both. So a crisis could be death, divorce, losing a job, or an opportunity. It could be, I see an opportunity in getting into chickens, but no one ever starts without seeing an opportunity or a crisis happening. So that's the first condition that needs to be present in every single entrepreneurial journey. The second one is a tolerance for pain. So if you're on that entrepreneurial journey, you will most likely have a high tolerance for pain. Every day as an entrepreneur, we get rejected. You're too tall, you're too short, you're too expensive, you haven't been in the market long enough, you're not as good as your competitors. We get rejected all the time. In the nascency period of entrepreneurship, when you first start, when you come up with the idea in the shower, and you start, you get out and you tell your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend the story about this idea around that you've got in your mind, and you say to your wife, yeah, this is the idea. She goes, okay, go to work now. That's your first rejection. And then you get to work, and then you talk to your mate there and you tell him or her about your idea, and they go, that's a nice idea, but it'll never work. And then you finally pluck up the courage and you do your, what they call the MVP, minimal viable product. You build this thing on the side, your side hustle, which I've got issues with, but let's not talk about that. So you've got the side hustle, and then you go to your bank manager and you tell them about it, and he or she doesn't understand it and says, no, just stay in your job. You get rejected. When you look at that, that's then called the nascency period. When you look at that time, 99.9% of business ideas die in that nascency because there isn't a tolerance for pain, for rejection in that time. And then once that you've started, then in your first couple of months or years, you just keep being rejected again and again. So there's a high mortality before you even get off the ground, and high mortality after you've got off the ground. So do you have a tolerance for pain? So every single successful entrepreneur who's been around, is watching this right now, you will know that you've got a high tolerance for pain. The next one is a high tolerance for risk. So if you look at just look at the risk profile of people who start businesses. If you start the story around, let's say 22, 23, you're not married, you don't have kids, you've got a much higher tolerance for risk than somebody who my age has got 2 kids in private school, a bond, commitments, etc. So if I had started Raizcorp today, I probably would have given up a lot earlier because I wouldn't have had that tolerance for risk and wouldn't have got off the ground. That wouldn't have been present. That condition wouldn't have been present. Yet when you go to those 60-year-olds that we spoke about, the kids are out of home, the bond is paid off, the networks are set, And so there's also, once again, there's this curve of risk, the tolerance for risk, that a 60-year-old and a 23-year-old have more similarity in the tolerance for risk than a 23-year-old and a 35-year-old who's already got kids and bonded, etc. Number four, the fourth condition that needs to be present is the belief in your ability to muster resources. Now we hear from, you've heard from many entrepreneurial stories about the story about if I knew then what I knew now, then I wouldn't have started out, this business. I'm sure you've heard that story before. But what happens when entrepreneurs start is, technically speaking, most entrepreneurs that start do not have all the requisite resources to make a successful business. They don't have the clients. They might or might not have the capital. They don't have all the staff. They don't have all the systems. They don't have and the list goes on. But in the research around successful entrepreneurs, what they always do have is a belief that they will muster those resources, that they will go and get those resources and put it together. Don't worry, I'll get the money. Yeah, don't worry, I'll find the clients. Don't worry, I'll get the staff. Don't worry, I'll put it together. That deep belief system that they can put it together is more important than what they have. And every single success story has got that. Number five that needs to be present, that condition, is the ability to learn and iterate. Any entrepreneur who is watching this right now, and if this were a live environment, I'd say to you, put up your hand. If I suppose you could digitally put up your hand. So I would say, for all of you, put up your hand, and then everyone puts up their hand, and I'll say, all right, everyone who's got exactly the same business as they did on day one when they started, okay, put down your hand. Okay, everyone. So if you've got exactly the same business, put down your hand. Okay, and everyone will put down, will keep their hand up, because every single person that has started a business that is successful iterates, learns and iterates. And without that ability to learn and iterate and adapt, when you go out to market and they say, no, I don't want it in green, I want it with pink dots. If you don't learn, if you don't iterate, if you don't adapt from your learning, you do not exist months later. So every successful entrepreneur has to have that innate in them. And as you might know, for those who are a little older, sometimes in your youth, you might be not open to listening and to understanding different perspectives and then applying that learning. So those are the five conditions that need to be present. I think my last point is that when I see entrepreneurs, I very often can tell whether they are going to succeed or not just by listening to their language. First of all, there's a lot of blame in language. Entrepreneurs that have a high blame composition in their language. It's because of, my partner stole from me. It's because of COVID. It's because of this. It's because of that. Are part of the 96%. The other thing I always know when I hear an entrepreneur speaking about the fact that they're building a business, and they say, so why did you stop that last business? Now I got bored. Well, that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. I got bored is a huge indicator that this is a so-called, inverted commas, serial entrepreneur, and I have issues with that too. And so they will never commit and go back to that commitment to push things through. So I've put a lot of concepts out there right now, and perhaps I can stop now and start engaging with you to hear your perspectives, and just maybe some questions. Right. This thing is that Refilware that has got a question?
Yes, I do have a question. My name is Refilwe. So I fall under I think it's the second, number one, I think I do have father issues. So I was like, maybe I'm on the right space. But then also I fall under I saw an opportunity. So when I started my business, I was working full time, and then I knew I could design as well. So I'm on the design industry. So I saw an opportunity on social media. I jumped for it, and then that's how I started my business. It's something that I've always wanted to have, but I wasn't sure. And when I was working, I saw a leg, and then I jumped in. And then while I was working and doing that, few months later, I resigned from my full-time job, because then I was like, okay, this is doing good. But now when I got into the entrepreneurship, I got stuck where I was like, I don't have a mentor or guidance. And then I was like, let me start something where I can try and learn from the people who have, helped. And now those two things kind of worked together for a while. But after that, it went all down, because now I was not able to finance the other project, and I also didn't have a job. So now I'm stuck at, okay, cool. I had to go back to a full-time job. I'm like, okay, I have to pause this because it's not working. And now I'm back at the full-time, but I don't know if I should continue on the same business. I still see an opportunity, but also I feel like my career at the same time is a bit let down, because I kind of neglected it for a bit and went full-time on entrepreneurship. So I'm not sure what to do or how to go back in, because the opportunity is there, but I'm still behind with my career and the business.
So Rafil, I don't know, I can't answer the question as to which route you should go. But for me, if I listen, you said you saw the opportunity, but there wasn't a tolerance for pain, and there's certainly what I'm hearing is there isn't a tolerance for risk. You haven't pushed through from the risk point of view. You went back to the safety of the corporate world, and so you might say, well, I didn't have the money. So then the question I would have is that why did you start there? Why didn't you get those resources? So it comes back to, do you believe you have the ability to muster that resource? So for me, if I'm straightforward right now, I don't think you've precipitated yet. I would say go back to the corporate career, build up your confidence, build up the idea, and wait to precipitate at the right point in time. I'm going to move over to Mavis.
Okay. Hello, please, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mavis.
Okay, thank you so much. It's been great so far with all that you've shared. I have a little bit of challenge. I don't know if it's with the commitment part, or maybe because I'm trying to get everything together. I went into the entrepreneurial space with a bigger vision of doing agribusiness, trying to change, not just concentrate on the raw part, but into the processed part. I started with some part, but then along the line, I was able to put myself into some programs where I could grow the agri products on my own, then end up processing it. But I don't know, maybe I've not been able to really translate my vision so much to the people around me, because sometimes I feel because I started with some part of the processing, which wasn't really me doing it, but just outsourcing, I tried to stop that and now go full-time into the agri itself, then make sure that my end product is being processed. So I don't know at this point in time, is it that I'm failing my commitment, or maybe I'm now trying to get my clearer picture to really get it done? I'm kind of a bit confused.
Yeah, so Mavis, if I can, once again, I don't know if I'm fully understanding what you're asking, but if what I'm hearing is commitment, is the lack of, you're not committing. I hear two things. There isn't sufficient commitment to the journey. And I see that with many entrepreneurs, is that, the first couple of months are absolutely, or the first couple of years are gruesome as an entrepreneur. And most people don't commit to pushing through those bad times. And that comes back to resourcing for that time. So first of all, it's about, you've gone at it, and maybe you've now realized how difficult it is, and just being ready for how difficult it is makes it even makes it easier because now you're ready. You've got there's more alignment in terms of your expectation to how difficult it is. The second thing that I heard you talk about is about the vision and your inability to articulate that sufficiently. And I think that, you know, I've just done a whole series called Pitch and Polish. We had about 2.4 million views on Pitch and Polish on Facebook and YouTube. And the whole thing there is about being able to articulate yourself, because what we found was most entrepreneurs don't get funding because they cannot tell their story in a succinct way that shows the value proposition to a market. So to me, I would spend time on not just on the vision, but going to read and watch, and it's on YouTube. You can go look it up, Pitch and Polish. You can just watch these pitches and the questions and answers and try and learn from that in order to hone your pitch. And hone your vision by articulating it. So those would be my 2 points that I would ask you to concentrate there. Then I've got number 27764. I'm sure that's not your real name, but what question do you have for me, 27764?
Okay, my apologies about that. I'll fix that. With me, I'm a money engineer, but due to the money engineering going into automation, I've just realized that I decided to go study a computer science degree so that I can be able to understand better into that. But then what's happening now is I wanna indulge into consulting, but I'm a bit confused in terms of what is it that I require, because now someone was like, you need EXA to be registered as part of EXA. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the procedures engineers go into consulting. And then I also don't understand actually what is it that is required, or maybe whom I could ask in terms of the requirements for me to be able to make sure that I'm good or well equipped for me to start up as a consulting person. And also, how do I know whether I'm ready? Because what is happening now, I just have almost 7 years of process engineering, but now in terms of automation, I could say I only have 3 years. So how do I know it's good enough or I'm ready? And what is it that I need to make sure that I put in place to ensure that I'm in the right direction?
Okay, so let me just answer that in a weird way. So first of all, I always listen to language. I've got a show on Business Day TV for the last 10 years, and almost every single week I will talk about the language that people use. And the language that you use is good enough, the word's good enough. That means to me that from a psychological point of view, you've got what they call a critical parent. You've got somebody who's judging you in your head about, are you good enough? So you've got to get rid of that voice. You are good enough. I don't know you, but you are good enough. And every entrepreneur is both good enough and not good enough at the same time. It's irrelevant whether you're good enough or not good enough. It's what's more important is that you get in and then you learn and you iterate and you start. Starting is more important than good enough. Gosh, if you looked at when I started at Raizcorp 21 years ago, I'm embarrassed by my proposals. I'm embarrassed by the emails that I would send out there. And looking back, it was incredibly unprofessional and novice. But I started, I learned, I got a little bit better each time. And to me, that's the important thing, is that you actually start. The second thing that I want to say, which is maybe going to be a little controversial, is that I don't think that consulting is a great entrepreneurial journey. It might be a good way to earn money for yourself, but it's not a great entrepreneurial endeavor. Why? Because you sell hours. And how many hours do you have a day? You have 24. I'm hoping that you sleep some part of that. So maybe at maximum, you've got 18 hours at a time. And that's your capacity that you can sell. That's it. And knowing many consultants who've done extremely well, okay, but I also know many consultants that do well, then then starve for a few weeks or months and then do well, and it's up and down, it's very chunky. So to me, when people want to get into the consulting space, I always say to them, rather get into a business where you can not sell hours. That's a far better alternative. But you are good enough. I'll end there. Craig, I see you got your hand up.
Alon, we have a question on YouTube from Miss Bontley 25. Please elaborate more on the missing father figure point. It's powerful.
Okay. So the two psychologists, Collins and Moore, in the late 60s, they did some research on entrepreneurs. And they found that entrepreneurs with father issues were far more likely to become successful. Father issues meant your father was either absent physically, dead, divorced in a different place, or emotionally to you. Your father wasn't available to you emotionally. And what you find with entrepreneurs is that when their father, and they actually found that if their father issues and an overdoting mother, the combination was the most powerful of all. So what is the father issue about? So the father issue is just, and this is all hypothesis, it's all hypothetical, there's no proof, but these are the different theories that when in the animal kingdom, if you look at the alpha male there, and then the young male goes and tries to challenge the older male is more experienced, physically bigger, stronger, and the older male, it does, pushes the young male away. And then a couple of years later, it tries again, and the older male wins. And then a couple of years later, the older male gets weaker, and but still has the experience. And then finally, the younger male, fights the older male and wins. And then that whole thing is witnessed. And so their right to be the alpha male is understood because everyone saw it happen. With absent fathers, and this happens in the human environment, whether it's a male or female, who is the entrepreneur. When your father doesn't acknowledge you, when your father doesn't see you, you spend your life trying to prove why you deserve to be, in inverted commas, in that successful, in that pinnacle or alpha male position or alpha female position. So and it's deeply rooted. And even me explaining this to you, if you have father issues, it won't take it away. My mentor, who's a dollar billionaire, has got huge father issues, and he's in his 70s. I've got father issues, and most of the entrepreneurs that I invest in have got father issues. If you've got father issues, you sort of come to the front of the queue at Raizcorp. You don't bother standing in the queue, just come right in. It's such a powerful driver. So that's the whole thing about father issues. There's a lot of research around it, and the combination with an overdoting mother. Right. I also saw that there was a question around the side hustle from Hillary, asking me around the side hustle here. So, side hustle is very in. It seems to be that there's a lot of, what's the word? There's a lot of, it's very trendy right now to have side hustles. To me, I'm very against side hustle in the sense that it comes back to that commitment. It's about committing to one thing. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't start another business while doing something while in the corporate? No. But when you call it a side hustle, then the language, and I spoke about language, the languaging is that this is a thing on the side. When you language this, inverted commas, side hustle, is that I'm preparing for this as my business, it's a very different relationship with that thing, with that business. It's about, I'm going to launch the business whilst currently earning some income, and then learning, getting more resources, etc. And then I will move into that. So to me, it's more a function of language and a function of relationship with that. The same thing I spoke about, this concept of serial entrepreneurs and serial entrepreneurs, where they go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Look at the statistics around that. Most people who are successful are not serial entrepreneurs. And they always come up with the story that I've got bored or whatever the case may be. There are exceptions. Yes, there are exceptions, but I'm not talking about the media exceptions. I'm talking about the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs who call themselves serial entrepreneurs, but what they really are is people who've worked on one business and then it didn't work so well, and then it went to another, and it didn't work so well and went to another, and have reframed that to themselves and to their friends and family that I'm a serial entrepreneur. By far the majority of successful entrepreneurs commit for a long period to a single business. I see there's I don't know the name here. Is it Kupila Kwezwe Accountants? Got a question from you?
Thanks, Alon. It's me, Dando. I forgot to change my name. Sorry. I'm loving what you're sharing thus far. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. Yeah, I'm quite intrigued by the psychological aspects that you've touched on, because I feel as if I'm in a space where I feel as if I'm doing well given the life cycle of the business. But I'm recognizing some of the hindrances that I find myself, getting stuck on, especially the psychological aspects, especially with me exposing myself to more reading. I'm slowly breaking them down. So I just wanted to find out on the psychological aspects of the business, is there any advice that you can share, perhaps, that concerning individuals that one could follow, who's really posed on that? I remember I've started exposing myself to Malcolm Gladwell, who has touched a bit on that, but I'm looking to expose myself on more material at that, because I'm seeing a lot of change when I focus on the psychological parts of my life and of my entrepreneurial journey.
Thanks, Tano. For me, this is all about mentorship, and is the Mentorship Boardroom and Marvel Mentorship Mondays. That's what we're calling ourselves. So my mentor, I'm 54 right now. My mentor I met at the age of 23. Same mentor I still have today. This is my dollar billionaire mentor. When I was 23, when I first started, I asked him, how do you become successful? How do you become, how do you become wealthy? How do you become a successful entrepreneur? And I spent many years under his tutelage, under his mentorship. But the one thing that he said to me at the age of 23 was, entrepreneurship is 99% psychology and 1% hard work and 1% good luck. And, what he was saying, I mean, those aren't the stats. To me, it's a huge amount of luck. It's a huge amount of hard work and a huge amount of psychology. But the messaging he was saying to me is that how you control what's going on between your ears, how it is that when you lose, when you something, how you get up again. How is it that when you succeed, that you don't let it go to your head? How is it that when you're in a negotiation, that you can keep yourself calm? How is it that, when you're selling, that you understand the psychology of the situation? And I took that hugely to heart. And so I became incredibly interested in, as you sound like you are, this entrepreneurial, the psychological journey. I'll give you a couple of people that, if you want, there's a concept of behavioral psychology, which is around understanding the market. And that would be the likes of Daniel Pink that you can read on there's another one that'll come to me now. It's running around right at the edge of my head. I'll get it before the end out of my head. But I think what's more important is not about the psychology of the market, the psychology of consumers. It's about your own psychology. And to me, the there, it's about surrounding yourself with people who can give you feedback, honest feedback, and it's about a mentor that can give you honest feedback. Because in that, you get a perspective, a different perspective in your journey. I know very often in the one book I wrote called Lose the Business Plan, I tell the story about me going, I was devastated. I'd gone through a month end. I hadn't paid my staff. I was in my early 20s, and I had 40 staff, and I had no more money to pay rent, everything. Like, it was all doom and gloom. I had people sitting in reception waiting to be paid. And I was invited to lunch by this guy called Stan. And I was completely depressed as I walked into that lunch, praying, of course, that he would pay. And at the end, I was like, couldn't wait. I was so excited about life and about my journey. And it was in him reframing what was going on. So I kept talking about it's all over. And he kept saying, no, it's just a cash flow issue. No, but I said, but like, you don't understand. It's like really, really real for me. If I'm not going to pay my staff, they're not going to come to work, and then it's all over. So yeah, that's a cash flow issue. Tell me more about the technology that you've got. Like, explain that to me. And he kept focusing on this technology and not on the fact that I didn't have money. Because he kept saying, don't worry, that's just a cash flow issue. When I came back to work, I just went to look for funding because it was a cash flow issue. And I had this most incredible technology. So that reframed me in that time. Now, that ability to reframe your mind is the most important thing, skill that you need as an entrepreneur. And that you're going to get best from a mentor. All right, Lebogang. Lebogang? All right, Craig?
Right, Alon, we've got a question on YouTube. Zakele Ndlovu wants to know, is there a difference between entrepreneur and the business person? If so, what are differences between them?
So a business person, so an entrepreneur generally is somebody who has seen an opportunity and taken risk on that opportunity. If you look at where the word entrepreneur comes from, it's from the French word to undertake something, to start something. So entrepreneurship is very often associated with the start, somebody who's prepared to start, take that, and take the risk. So it's, whereas a business person could be somebody who bought a business, didn't start it, they took the risk part, but they didn't start it. Technically speaking, there's very little difference because you can be an entrepreneur and a business person, but you can be a business person and not an entrepreneur. So I'll give you an example of that. So there are many businesses that I've invested in over the years where I've got a professional CEO who's not an entrepreneur, but they're great business people, but they don't take the risks. And, and their operating system is very different to, for example, my operating system, which would be to take more risk. So that would be the fundamental difference, risk and start. Let's try Lebogang again. All right, Lebogang, it looks like your speaker is working. Let's see if there's...
Hi, Alon, sorry about that. I don't know if my mic is working now.
Yes, it's working, right.
Okay, thank you so much. My question is around multiple income stream as an entrepreneur. To give you a practical example, you've just touched now on the issue of cash flow, which is a problem for most entrepreneurs. And to give you an example of how myself I've tried to handle it, is that I run a marketing agency, and to make sure that the entire income does not come from creative services or campaigns, I've started a separate company that focuses on marketing strategy for small businesses, which now I try and balance the focus not to be on one particular set of clients. Now, that is good and well, but then it comes with challenges in terms of time, because I have to service the main clients for the accounts that we handle. At the same time, I have to be in a consultation with clients or small business owners. And now what I've realized that it takes away so much time from the main work in as much as the work gets done. From your experience, how should one go about managing multiple income streams? Because they are very important, but then the execution part of it is always a challenge. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ebachang. It's a great question. And I think you've partly answered the question yourself, but let me just talk to you just philosophically around that. So, you know, when I speak to many entrepreneurs, they talk about, you know, that they've got a business, this business, and they've got that business, and then they give you their card. And on the one side of the card, it's, you know, I do catering. On the other side of the card, you know, they do tents, and then they give you another card, and they're in ceilings, and you know, they make ceilings. So I said, look, I get the catering and the tents, how you connect those two, but how did you get to ceilings? You know, how did come you do ceilings? No, I was doing a gig at a person's house, and then, you know, when I went in to go to the toilet, I saw their ceilings were not in good condition. So I told them I could fix their ceilings. So now I'm in that business. And I say that jokingly, but it's not, that's actually a true story. And I see that all the time, that we specialize in, and then there's a telephone book of specialities. And the psychology for the entrepreneurs, that the more lines they have out in the sea, the, you know, more likely they are to get some business. And they talk about multiple income streams. So the one part of what I'm saying now is focus on one thing and do it really well, and to go against your, be counterintuitive and focus. You actually will make more money by focusing than having more lines in the sea. But now I'm going to contradict myself. So the concept of not being dependent on any one client, the concept of dependency, that you should not be dependent, is incredibly important. And we saw that now with COVID, with many businesses falling over. Now the difference now, and this is the important part, the difference between successful entrepreneurs who are able to get multiples, as you call it, income streams, and those who have failed doing that, is the concept of core competence, is that they have a single set of core competencies, and they use that in a different way and repackage that in a different way to different markets. So they're constantly working on, you know, from what I'm hearing is you've got a marketing competency, and you package that in a certain way, and now you go for that market, and you repackage it in a different way, and you go for that market. And your focus is on the core competencies, and then you build out a business case to go and service that market. And that if there's no business case, and what I mean by business case is that you can afford a person going out there to sell because there's sufficient margin. And while that's happening, you're busy building out the next case, and then you are the salesperson in that area, and then you put a salesperson in there, or a sales team, and then you go to the third one, and so forth. But what most entrepreneurs do is they split it. They have competence here and the competence here, two different competencies. They don't build a core competence, okay, and keep working on that. And so now they're running between this competence and that competence, and then they don't concentrate on the model, working the financial model working here, or the financial model working there. So then they get exhausted, and then they form part of the 96% that fail. So I think in a nutshell, focus on your core competencies, that's a focus, and then build out different business cases for different markets of those core competencies. That's how I would advise one of the businesses I'm involved in. Bongowetu.
Thanks, Alan, and thanks so much for the great insights. I think you've touched on what I'm about to ask, but I would really like to understand, what would you be your advice to an entrepreneur who's starting? How can they position themselves in their business so that maybe in 6 to 12 months, they're focusing on scaling and not necessarily still maybe driving sales or doing marketing or operational things? Because I think one of the things that COVID has exposed is that a lot of these multiple income stream or side hustle businesses don't last very long because they demand a lot of your time and your hours. So how can an entrepreneur starting out plan to really exit working within the business and really work on scaling it up?
Okay, so the one thing there I would just caution you is that, in Raizcorp, I've got hundreds of employees. But the two reports I have to me till today is my head of sales and my head of marketing. And I'm in those two departments every single day. I market, I sell constantly. There's a concept of critical, I spoke about core competencies, but there's two other sets of competencies which we never speak about. One is critical competencies and one is scale competencies. So critical competencies, there's 3 critical competencies in every single business. It's sales, it's marketing and distribution. You, as the entrepreneur, need to always be focused on those. If you look at, Bill Gates, right until he resigned, he was out there marketing and selling Microsoft, the concept is. What do you think Elon Musk is doing today, Jeff Bezos? They're out there selling and marketing the brand, the company all the time. So the first thing I'd caution you is mentally, it's operationally, yes, but sales, marketing, and distribution, you hold on to for dear life always. So that's the critical competence. Then you work on the core competencies. Okay, so this generates revenue, the critical competencies. Then the core competencies generates the efficiency and the USP, the differentiation in the market. And then the scale competencies, which it's different for every single business, as well as the core competencies, you would have to work out in order to scale, what competencies do I need in the business, and start building those secondary to your core competencies. Last word on core competencies now is when you're building a business, if your core competencies, how you've identified what your core competencies are, and we don't have sufficient time for that right now. If you have core competencies, mentally you have to say there has to be a department for each one of those. So I'll give you an example. In Raizcorp, one of our core competencies is entrepreneurial selection. I have a department, I have a head department, and a core competency means I want to be best in the world at it, I'll invest in it, it's internal, I'll never outsource it, and it's a department. So if you're not thinking about creating departments with department heads for your core competencies, you're never going to get to a point where you can even start talking about your scale competencies. So in a nutshell, start with your critical competencies that you never let go of, build out your core competencies with a mindset that you've got a department and a head of department that runs those operationally, and then start to build out your scale competencies. And I mean, we don't have enough time, and we've got Sheila Boloi here with a question. I hope I'm trying to give you very tight answers here, and very often these questions require like an hour to respond, but I'm trying to be fair to everyone, so sorry. Sheila?
Hi, Alon. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. I think my question ties in with what you were just saying. Initially, I had 2, but let me just ask one for the sake of the rest. It's just around, that head of departments. But let me start where my question begins. Say in this particular case, I'm an entrepreneur and I don't want to let go of my business. However, I need to step away for a while just for me to go generate more income and gain more experience in a specific area that is linked to my business. And currently setting up resources for these departments or particular operational areas. But my question is, how do I then go about to pick someone who can really manage, who can be the managing director of my business if I step away for a while. I'm not going to go away completely, but I need somebody else to look after the business for some time. So what are the sort of things that one has to sort of look at, especially, from someone who's fairly new in business? This would be my 4th year in business, and I need to hire a managing director as I'm the founder and the CEO at this point. What are the sort of things that I need to be looking out for?
Sheila, I'm going to give you a very unsatisfactory answer, is that you shouldn't do that at all. It's not going to work. I've never seen it work. Never. And I've seen a lot, and there's a lot of fantasy about now they're going to run the business and I'm going to be at work, and it just does not work. Last week I looked at a business and then found out the person who was applying to our equity division, where we take equity in Partner Elite, was an employee. And the shareholder didn't even know. And how can I even have this conversation? You cannot. So for as long as you can, rather stay in the business. If not, shut it down, sell it, and start again later. They will destroy value for you. They will. That would be my advice: is don't do it. Don't even look for that person. I've never ever seen it work forget the long term, and not even the medium term. I think we've got 1 minute left. I saw, but maybe I can. I'm sorry about that, Sheila, to give such a blunt answer, but that's what mentors are supposed to do. I've got no vested interest. So for all of you, thanks very much for listening. If you want to follow me, also I post a lot on Twitter, on Allon Raiz, ALLON RAIZ. So you can watch my tweets every morning. I normally tweet around 6:30 every morning, something, and connect with you there. But I'm here every single month, once a month. I'll be here on a Monday. I think this is the 3rd Monday of the month. I think, or the 4th. I can't. Whatever today is of the month, I'll be here every month at this time, and I'll be going through those 20 lessons. And as you can see, I'll answer every single question that you want. I've been involved in the space. I love entrepreneurs. I love our journey. I love our struggles. And quite frankly, the more successful entrepreneurs that we can produce in this country, the better for all of us. So I thank you all, and wish you a good evening further. Thank you.